All right, we talked about the different governments over the last couple of days that are sprouting in terms of our totalitarian umbrella that we filled out, okay? And these totalitarian governments are very, very similar, and they're dotted kind of sporadically across Europe, as well as Asia, as we are moving through the 1930s, okay? Just a little bit of a refresher for you as we are getting ready to rumble. There are these different governments, these totalitarian and non-totalitarian governments that are kind of clashing with each other, as well as vibing with each other, okay? So these type of different totalitarian governments underneath our umbrella, like, what are the three that we talked about that are under our totalitarian umbrella? Communism's one. What's another one? Not socialism. Josie? Nazism. What's the third one? Fascism. Okay, those are the three that kind of went underneath our totalitarian umbrella. Those, yes. Oh yeah, like we talked about like constitutional monarchy, but like the Japanese version as well. Yes, good job. So these different types of totalitarian governments are basically being like, hey, we're really similar to each other. We should start being friends. Okay, we talked about the fact that some alliances are going to be made in this early stages of World War II, and we know that alliances were a main cause of World War I. So alliances, kind of on the fence, okay? But these different types of totalitarian governments, these communist governments, these fascist governments, these Nazi governments, or governments that are practicing Nazism, okay, are going to start linking up, meaning that they are going to start talking to each other and making plans, okay? These plans are unspecified at the moment, but we'll get there, okay? And in the meantime, these other governments that are not under our totalitarian umbrella are generally at odds with the different political, economic, and social systems of totalitarianism, okay? So specifically, democratic countries and like elected governments are watching very closely or with a close eye, okay? Nobody's making any moves. Nobody's definitely friends at this point, but we're just kind of watching and waiting. And I say we as in democratic countries, including the United States, okay? But if we look at this, in hindsight, the United States has a lot going on still coming out of the Great Depression. So we can't devote all of our time to looking at these totalitarian governments, but we're still keeping a close eye, okay? This is just a quick visual, basically, of the different types of totalitarian governments that are dotting Europe during this time, during the 1930s. So everything in that brownish color, I shouldn't just say everything, the Soviet Union in this brownish color, okay, is a communist regime. Everything in the orangish color are fascist regimes. You can see regime, I'm just like not doing good with my consonants today, okay? Fascist regimes, as you can see, Italy obviously falls underneath that. That was our thing of fascism, or our example of fascism that we talked about when we talked about our umbrella. But Germany also falls under fascism just because Nazism isn't necessarily a government system. It's just a way of political, social, economic, et cetera, et cetera. But then we've still got all of these different countries under what we call authoritarian regimes, which are basically countries that have a dictator or a sole party, but they don't necessarily fall nicely into fascism or communism, meaning that communism is really about economic control and social control. Fascism is about government and military control. Authoritarian is just kind of somewhere in between. So not only do we have these ones that we talked about that fall under our totalitarian umbrella, but we also have a lot of other authoritarian governments that are just kind of dotted around as well, okay? So basically, we've got all of these other democratic or elected countries that are not very friendly with these types of governments that are caught in the middle. So places like Czechoslovakia, we've got Denmark and the Netherlands that are pretty, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Switzerland that are all pretty small, bordering one of the biggest ones, okay? So things don't look so great. Yes, Ryan? Who? One more time.
Franco?
Oh, I do not. Not off the top of my head. Not off the top of my head. I'd have to look it up.
Because we're only 2 years away from Franco.
Yeah.
And 2013 was when the new monarch was being elected.
Yeah. I think, I'd have to look that up. I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to look that one up though. Okay. All right. So This is our big term of the day. So over the last couple of days, totalitarianism was our big term. This is our big vocab of the day, okay? This term, appeasement. So this term appeasement has a lot of different definitions when we're looking in different ways. But does anybody, appeasement comes from the word appease, to appease something. Can somebody give me like a rough definition of what it means to appease somebody? Yeah, Ryan.
To give someone or something to make them happy,
Yeah.
or to cause them less anger towards you.
Yeah, in some cases, or in the cases we're going to talk about, definitely less anger, right? But it's basically to appease someone means to make somebody happy. Does that necessarily mean that you're happy in return? Not all the time, almost never when you use the term appease, okay? When you appease somebody, you're basically making somebody happy, giving them something to make them happy, okay? So appeasement, and when we're using it in our World War II unit, is the policy of giving a potential enemy what they want in order to maintain peace. So I've got somebody that is potentially a threat or a potential enemy to myself or my government, and I'm going to give them something in order for them to leave me alone. In general, this is France and Britain's response, because they are still allies and probably all, always have been, basically, okay? France and Britain, that is their reaction to Italy and Germany as these totalitarian governments are starting to get a little more aggressive. So France and Britain are trying to find ways or come up with ways to appease Italy and Germany so that another world war doesn't break out, okay? We're trying and we're still on that train of, putting off global fighting, okay? So why did they want appeasement, or why are they gonna go through this process? Obviously, they didn't want another war. And on the back burner, if you remember from our, end of World War I, France and Britain are more concerned with the Soviet Union or the former Russian Empire than they are with Italy and Germany. When they left World War I and went through their communist, when they went through their communist takeover, when they went through their communist revolution, they thought that that was a more pressing matter than what was happening with the fascist governments of Italy and Germany. Yes?
Was Lenin's student fought during World War
Right at the end, basically.
I? Okay, so that
Yep.
was what was happening.
Yep.
So Stalin,
Right at the end, they said like the coup was happening.
Yeah.
And so Russia said, hey, we got our own problems to deal with. Here's a treaty. Peace out.
Yeah.
And then they went through that whole process basically over those 10 years that everybody else was in the Great Depression, which still hurt them as well. But that is a whole other story. So again, appeasement, the policy of giving a potential enemy what they want in order to maintain peace. So in this instance, or in action in World War II, or in the lead up to World War II, I should say, Germany takes over Austria in March of 1938. This is kind of the first red flag that we're going to see with Germany's behavior going into World War II. Okay? Germany takes over Austria in March of 1938. So in September of 1938, basically in an attempt to stop Germany and to appease them, Britain and France write up something called the Munich Pact, which gave Germany a land or an area called the Sudetenland in order to maintain peace. The Sudetenland was basically a small part of Czechoslovakia. So I'm going to go back really quickly. So Czechoslovakia, like I said, is in the middle of all of this, right? The Sudetenland is like in this area right here, okay? So they basically said, here's the Munich Pact. We promise that you can have control over this little area if you promise not to go any further, that you stop in your tracks, that you maintain peace at all costs, okay? This is basically the equivalent of being like, hey, talking to your bully and being like, hey, I'll give you my lunch money if you promise not to beat me up after school. Cool. Is the threat of beating you up after school still there? Absolutely. But now you're just out your 20 bucks that you had for lunch, okay? So appeasement has a lot of boundaries that can be broken if it's not done well or if it's not done correctly. And in this case, Germany, after already putting up that first red flag, is now getting more things, which is going to make them a little greedy. Okay? So appeasement, we're giving the potential enemy what they want in order to maintain peace. We thought this was the best, and I say we as in like the democratic powers, okay? They thought that it was the best solution for the time. They had other things going on, okay? This is just a little, another visual for you guys to look at, okay, of what it's going to look like as Germany starts getting greedy, okay? That we have these red flags that continue to pop up, and they're not going to stop, okay? So Germany, these are basically boundary lines. So Germany in 1933 is, basically this area right here. It's going to Germany in 1933, Germany in 1938. This is all going to be taken over by Germany in 1938 by annexation. All of this in Czechoslovakia is going to be given and controlled by March of 1939, and conquered by Germany. More of this in Poland as we keep going forward. So it's basically, I know I went kind of in a roundabout way there, but basically Germany is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and there's no signs of stopping, even though these red flags keep going up. That process of appeasement is not working, okay? Germany is getting greedy, and it's not going to stop. That process of appeasement did not work, okay? I have a little bit of a, what's up, Ryan? Earned. Yes. Yeah. I have a little bit of a, a funny way or an interesting way to talk about how Germany starts getting greedy.
Yes, Logan, but my desk is small. I need this Polish boy's desk also.
Oh, come on.
Everyone gets the same size desk, Logan. Now, class. My teacher, I will need the Czechoslovakian boy's desk as well. Little Hitler, where's Little Pulaski? What's going on here? It's not my problem. Now it's my problem.
That's the best way that I can explain how World War II is going to go from here on out, right? We've got Lil Hitler, we've got Hitler in the German regime, continually taking things. First, they start with Poland, then they go towards Czechoslovakia, and eventually they have all of these desks from Europe, and the United States says, not my problem quite yet, but over the next couple of days, we'll tell you, or I'll tell you why it does become our problem, okay? So the Munich Pact happens in late 1938. Our try at appeasing the German regime happens in late 1938. By 1939, Germany has absorbed the rest of Czechoslovakia. They do not stop at the Sudetenland. They continue forward into the rest of Czechoslovakia, basically because they can't defend themselves, okay? Czechoslovakia is in the middle of all of those different totalitarian governments. They were already fighting for independence after World War I anyway. And they just couldn't get it together. Germany easily sweeps them, okay, through 1939. As Germany sweeps through Czechoslovakia, the next target on sight for Germany is Poland. Poland and the Polish independent land is land that used to be owned by the German, or I should say like the Ottoman Empire, where Germany comes from before World War I. So they set their eyes on Poland basically to reclaim German land, or at least that's what it looks like in their eyes. Also, as they are moving through Czechoslovakia, Czechoslovakia used to be basically part of the Russian Empire, and they are moving dangerously close to the USSR border, or the Soviet Union border. So now the USSR needs to get involved, or the Soviet Union needs to get involved and say, hey, you're getting kind of close to us. You really need to back up. We got our own things going on. Leave us alone, okay? So the Soviet Union and Hitler's Nazi regime come together and agree on a Nazi-Soviet non-aggression pact, which basically was just saying, we're not going to fight each other. You're not going to attack me. I'm not going to attack you. We're going to be copacetic. I'm not really involved with what you're doing. Or at least on the surface, That's what that Soviet non-aggression pact says, is I am not going to attack you. You're not going to attack me. Everything that you are doing is separate from what I'm doing. Okay. However, in the fine print of the Soviet non-aggression pact, in this unspoken word of the Soviet non-aggression pact, they secretly agree, they being the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany, agree that when Nazi Germany invades Poland later that year in 1939, they're going to divide Poland once it is successfully captured, meaning that half of Poland would go to Germany, half of Poland would go to the Soviet Union. This act is done basically in good faith between, the Nazi regime and the Soviet Union, even though neither of them wanted to fight each other. It was almost like Germany's own appeasement, okay? But you can see where this is going, right? They easily sweep through Czechoslovakia. They already know that they're going to invade Poland. It's just a matter of when. And on September 1st, 1939, Germany invades Poland using what we call blitzkrieg, which is a sudden attack tactic in military use. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a second, but basically they bombarded them with military troops on September 1st, completely took them by surprise, and in a matter of hours was able to take Warsaw, which is the capital of Poland. Hours, like less than 12, or like 12 hours-ish. It did not take a lot of time at all because Poland was absolutely not ready for it. Poland didn't know that they were going to be invaded. Poland thought they were safe. They were, enjoying their newfound independence after World War I. They had no idea what was coming for them. Basically, by the end of that week, so the initial invasion starts on September 1st. By the end of that week, all of Poland is taken over. And as you can see, this is basically what the blitzkrieg tactic looks like, okay? So not only is Germany coming in from a variety of different places, not just from the land, but also from the sea. They had basically taken the coast of the Baltic Sea and was coming down from the north, setting their sights on Warsaw, as well as other large cities like Krakow, and eventually trying to make its way to Brest-Litovsk, Litovsk, I can never say it correctly, which, if you guys recognize that name, that was the treaty during World War I that pulled the Soviet Union out of World War I. So the Soviet Union is also pushing in from the other side. Basically, once they get agreement, or once they get confirmation, I lost my train of thought, confirmation that Warsaw had fallen, by September 17th, the Soviet Union goes in on the eastern side, and that is when they go to split the territory, okay? It was an absolute invasion. It was an absolute travesty to Poland. Nobody knew that it was coming. And like I said, it fell in a matter, they were able to get to Warsaw in a matter of hours. It fell in a matter of days. And so the Soviet Union quickly comes in afterward. Okay. So the German invasion of Poland in late 1939 is basically the final red flag. So the first red flag being taking over, the first red flag came when they start moving into Austria. The second red flag came when they took over the rest of Czechoslovakia. This is the third red flag and the third and final strike. They really can't afford, or I mean they as in like these allied powers that we're going to talk about in just a second, they can't afford to stop or wait any longer. They have to move in on Germany and any of their aggressors or any of their colluders, I should say, okay, to stop them in their tracks, okay? There's no more red flags. There's no more appeasement. Obviously, appeasement did not work. They have to start moving, and it's going to bring about that beginning of the war. So actually, or who is next, basically what happens after Poland is invaded by Germany and by the Soviet Union. Hitler starts sending his army and starts making plans to send armies to different countries such as Denmark, Norway, Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, and eventually France. So all of those little small countries that were identified as non-totalitarian that bordered Germany, they're going to next. They wanted to make sure to take Poland because it was the largest of that area, or the largest of that Yeah, the largest of that area. That works. The largest of that area, and because it was quote unquote, stolen German land. But after that was over, after Warsaw fell, they're going to send these armies to a bunch of different places as well to try and gain more territory and more land as quickly as possible. Eventually, they make their way to France. And as we know, France is normally first out in the fight. That's not any other, or not any less true in this instance as well. France is one of the last places on their tour of domination throughout Western Europe, and France falls in 35 days. So it only took 35 days from Germany's invasion into France to take the city, basically all of France, other than like the very, very, or not southern, I should say, the very, very northwestern portion closest to the sea.
Well, Paris is like more west than east, right?
Yes.
And more south.
Yes. Yeah. They basically go as far down as possible to take the Mediterranean to be closer and closer to Italy and Spain, or, in that general direction heading towards Spain. They were only able to not capture, like I said, that northwestern portion next to the sea because it was closely monitored by Britain.
Yeah.
They really tried, which leads to the Battle of Britain, which I'll talk about in just a second. But basically, when Paris falls, France falls, Paris becomes like a pseudo capital for Nazi Germany. And it's already looking not so great for the quote unquote good guys. Okay. We're already taking a fat L to start. Okay. We already lost France.
I read something, and when they went to go to the Eiffel Tower,
Mhm.
they cut the elevator, so Hitler had to walk up all the stairs instead of go up the elevator.
That's kind of petty. Hey, it's small victories. Man, you can't win the whole country, you win the Eiffel Tower. Okay, so like I said, Hitler is just dominating all of these areas with basically no resistance because none of these countries, or at least I should say a lot of these countries, don't have as good of a military as the Nazi regime did. France, even with a very good military, didn't have the support of places like the Soviet Union and Britain to help them out. They had Britain's support, but Britain is still scrambling to make sure that they don't make it across the sea, which leads us to the Battle of Britain, which is an Air Force battle almost entirely in the air and on, or through basically the British Channel that stops the German invasion of Britain. It was very, very close. Germany was extremely close to infiltrating Britain's, Britain's lands, Britain's beaches, okay? But they're held off basically by these air forces, and Britain still has the best navy in the world, so they're able to hold them off at least a little bit longer. But this is when it starts kicking in of, oh God, this is serious, okay? Regardless of the red flags, regardless of what they tried to give them for appeasement, this is when Britain starts looking at this and goes, oh, this is like a big deal. You're coming for the big dogs, okay? We have to actually like start acting, okay?
And at this point, Japan does not.
No, Japan's not doing nothing right now. Japan is out of the picture right now. The Soviet Union is somewhat in the picture, somewhat not. And the United States is also not in the picture. This is basically a graphic, and you guys can write this down as well, of Axis versus Allied powers. This is who is in the fight. Who likes who doesn't like who, okay? So the Axis powers by the end of World War II looks like Italy, Germany, and Japan, okay? Italy and Germany have always been there from the start. We'll get to Japan in just a little bit. Give me till the end of the week, okay? But during this time in the late 1930s, Japan is still kind of dealing with their own things on the Pacific front, but Germany and Italy are full force into Europe. Yeah.
Do you know numbers on how many people died due to Stalin?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Because
It's in the hundreds of thousands, but not off the top of my head.
My sister, who's a historian,
Yeah.
and she said it was
Wasn't it like millions at that?
under his whole rule, it was more than all the deaths in World War II in Holocaust.
I wouldn't doubt it, but I don't have a direct number.
Because like when I was reading, it was like millions at that.
Mhm. Yeah, because
Yeah, so that's what I was referring. That's what I was referring to earlier when you guys were, or when you asked about what basically Russia was doing during that time. When the Great Depression hits worldwide, that's when the famine starts in Soviet Russia or in the Soviet Union, and things aren't going so hot. So that's basically what I was referring to with the famine and stuff like that. But not off the top of my head do I have a direct number, but that is a pretty widely accepted statistic, is that more people died under Stalin than in World War II as a whole.
Is Russia purple because it falls in between them because it's a totalitarianism, but they fought with the Allies?
Yes. So the reason that Russia is purple, so we've got the blues, which are the Axis powers, and we've got the allies, which are the red, that's the allied powers. So that's going to be eventually the United States, Great Britain, and France. Even though France fell in such a short amount of time, France is still providing military support and whatever other monetary support they can muster to Great Britain and eventually the United States. The USSR sits in the middle and is purple because they basically have a flip-flop relationship, okay? The USSR is communist and has a totalitarian government like these other Axis powers like Germany and Italy, but they basically, towards the end of the war, start receiving aid from the United States. They fought with the United States eventually to take down Germany, but they also signed this non-aggression pact with Germany and obviously split Poland, which is a conflict of interest. So the USSR kind of stays in the middle basically throughout the entirety of World War II. And that limbo is going to show after World War II as well. But I digress. Okay.
Does Switzerland actually do like nothing?
Yes.
They
They don't do nothing, but they choose to not fight.
Well, because they're just a bunch of mountains, so no one would want to go there.
Yeah, nobody can get over Switzerland. They're basically impenetrable. I wouldn't fight either. Which brings me, okay, to a conversation that we've had before that we're now going to have again, because Germany, Italy, Great Britain, France, and the Soviet Union, so basically everybody except for ourselves and Japan, are full force into this war now. We've got battles going on. We've got troops being, gathered up. We're in World War II now, okay? But as the United States on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean and basically dealing with our own problems, we have to now ask ourselves the same question that we had to ask at the beginning of World War I, which is whether we want to get involved or stay in isolation, okay? You do not necessarily have to write this down. This is just a little reminder of what isolation versus intervention is, okay? This is the question that we have to ask ourselves as Europe is getting full force into this fighting, whether we want to get involved or stay away. So just a reminder, intervention is getting involved in fighting for a variety of different reasons, including but not limited to peace. So we had a conversation during World War I about how intervention and internationalists were different. Some people wanted to fight, some people wanted to fight for peace. Either way, it's getting involved. So intervention is getting involved. Isolation, staying out of the fight, generally for the good of your own country, whether for economic, social, or political reasons. If I'm the United States at this point, it's definitely going to be for economic reasons, but either way, isolation is staying out of this fight, okay? You guys can go ahead and put your notes away. You are just going to need a writing utensil for the rest of what we are doing today, but we're going to do a little bit of a group activity here. Yes, sir.
Bad cartoons.
Yes. I know what we're gonna do. I know what you're talking about. Okay, so just as a little bit of a, kind of getting your brain rocking and rolling with intervention versus isolation, I'm gonna give you guys a task that we are going to do together. And basically I'm gonna ask you which is which, intervention versus isolation. So I am going to show you a reason or a piece of evidence that supports either joining the war or staying out of the war from the United States perspective. So I'm going to give you a piece of evidence that is either for joining the war or against joining the war, and you need to tell me which one is which, okay? When I give you this prompt or when I give you this piece of evidence, if you think it is for joining the war and intervention standpoint, I want you to put up the number 1, okay? When it is an isolation aspect, or if it's something that says no, stay out of the war, or a piece of evidence to stay out of the war, I want you to put up a nice big 2, okay? I'm gonna ask you guys why you think this way as we are going through it. Whoever wants to be brave, or I will voluntold you, okay? Either way, that's what I'm asking. So number 1 for intervention, number 2 for isolation. Are you ready? There's not that many of them. I promise we'll go through these quick, okay? All right. Number 1, alliances are a massive mistake and cause of World War I. We should avoid them. Is this an intervention or an isolation? I see lots of 2s. I see a couple of 1s. I think 2 is the right answer here. Why would this be an isolationist adventure? Why would this be a statement in theory for isolation? Cole.
Because it's trying to avoid cause of clash war.
Yeah, we learned our lesson, right? Alliances are no good. It was a cause of the last war. We should stay out of this and stay out of these alliances so that doesn't happen again. Okay, good job. Number 2, the Axis powers, so Germany, Italy, and all the rest of them who are going to join them, are a threat to the United States. Is this an intervention or an isolation statement? Awesome. I see lots of 1s. That is correct. That is an intervention statement that the Axis powers are a threat to the United States. Why would this be an intervention question or an intervention piece of evidence? I promise it's easier than you think. Don't overthink it. Ryan?
Threats are supposed to be eliminated.
Threat should be eliminated. If somebody is threatening me or threatening you, right, it should be eliminated. So it should be an intervention. All right, number 3, the Allied powers have similar viewed as the United States. Remember, the Allied powers are Britain and France. The Allied powers have similar views as the United States. Is this an intervention reasoning or an isolation reasoning? You take whatever time you need. Is this an intervention reasoning or an isolation reasoning? I see lots of 1s here. I got a couple of people who are too scared to answer. That's okay. This one's a little bit on the fence. This is an intervention reasoning. This is a piece of evidence for intervention. Jace, you were one of my first ones. Why is this an intervention?
It says nothing about staying out of the war
Yeah.
at all. It never says we're gonna back down. It's just saying do the same deal with us.
Yeah, they have the same views as us. It says nothing about backing down at all. Ryan, do you want to add to that?
The Allied powers are currently fighting in the war. So if they have similar views, then they probably fight with.
Hold on, guys. We're in the middle of the conversation. Please sit down. If they have similar views and they are already in the war, then we should probably go join them, right? That would be a good reason for intervention, okay? All right, let's go to number 4. Number 4, the U.S. economy is still recovering from the Great Depression and we have no cash. Is this a reason to intervene or a reason to stay isolated? I see lots and lots of 2s. That's correct. The economy is garbage. We should stay out of it. I basically answered that one for you, or the answer is in the question, right? The U.S. economy is recovering from the Great Depression. We have absolutely no cash to spend. Remember during World War I, we were talking about specifically the fact that we needed a wartime economy, meaning that we needed lots of cash on hand to spend on bullets and guns and uniforms and et cetera, okay? We don't have that money. All right, number 4. Somebody needs to put pressure on the Axis powers from a new perspective. Is this a reason to intervene or a reason to stay isolated? Somebody needs to put pressure on the Axis powers from a new perspective. I heard a camera. It needs to be turned off. Phones away. I see lots and lots of 1s here. That's a good job. Somebody tell me why this is a reason to intervene. Chase.
Because they want us to intervene, put pressure on them.
Yeah, either they want us to or we should take the initiative, right? Somebody has to do it. We're like 1-0 for, W's on world wars. Maybe we should go put the pressure on them, okay? Somebody has to. We should do it, right? Last but not least is the last one. The best way to stay safe is to stay out. Is this an intervention tactic or an isolation tactic? I should see a lot of 2s. Thank you, Brendan. I should see a lot of 2s. Yes.
It depends on your perspective. If you want to stay safe, then you should choose to stay out of the war. But if you don't care about safety, then that's up to debate.
Also fair, right? There's 2 different sides to this question, but for the most part, if the statement is saying the best way to stay safe is to stay out, then that should be an isolation incident, or that would be something for isolation, okay? All right, so, how much time do I have left? A little bit less than 10 minutes. Yeah, we're gonna go ahead and go for it. Okay, so the next thing that we are going to do is we are going to expand our conversation of intervention versus isolation in a more American appeal, right? These are just general thought processes. These are just general statements, general pieces of evidence that people are thinking throughout this time period. But I'm going to give you guys some actual physical evidence or some physical things that are either going to be for entering the war, intervention, or against entering the war, isolation, okay? I am going to go ahead and split you off, into groups. I know we have a short amount of time, but I'm going to go ahead and split you off into groups. So it'll be groups, 4 different groups, okay? And I'm gonna give you a cartoon to look at. Basically what we're gonna do for the rest of this period is you're gonna get into your groups. I want you to look at this cartoon and then we will revise them and look at them and review them tomorrow. Sound good? Just based on the limited amount of time. Okay, so I'm gonna just go ahead and I'm gonna pause.